Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you
50.
for joining us.
Right.
I'm Dr. Randhawa. I'm the founder and CEO of Food Allergy Institute. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. It's going to be a great conversation and great webinar today because it's not just me. I've done a few of these now, and it's always great to give you my perspective, answer your questions. But today we actually have a tip mom, Holly Leatherman, who will be joining us. We'll introduce her here in a second. She's been through the whole program. She has tremendous amount of experience. I think hearing her perspective is really is incredibly valuable for you as parents or potential patients who are wanting to join the tolerance induction program. As usual, we will go ahead and answer any and all questions you have at the end of the presentation. So please have those teed up and ready. As I always request, if you can, turn your screen on. We're all in the same community here. We'd be happy to see you, and you can also obviously understand who we are and what we're all about. So to kick things off, we're going to go ahead and play a quick video just kind of summarizing what the tolerance induction program is truly all about. So I had the opportunity to be at the Quad AI conference this past weekend. This is the American Academy of Asthma Allergy Immunology Conference and the World Allergy Organization Conference. This is about 8,000 allergists who were present at this conference here in San Diego. And there's many takeaways from it, but I mean, really the one main takeaway that I found after talking to an incredible number of allergists over a few days of time is that they are frustrated. The allergists, the private practice allergists, the global community of allergists are frustrated. They're frustrated that for the last 15 to 20 years, there's been a lot of talk about treatments. There's been a lot of opportunities to try and move towards a pharmaceutical solution. And in the end, it just has not come to fruition. And in the end, they are simply talking about fear and avoidance. That's the theme that is there for all of their patients, whether they're young or old. It's the same story, and what that does to them socially, and what that does to them as young folks growing up, what it does for them as young adults growing into their main phases of life. This is a difficult condition, it's a difficult disease state to be with all the time. And then when we presented to them what the tolerance induction program is and what the Food Allergy Institute does on a daily basis, there was a real change in their point of view. There was a glisten in their eye that said, you know what, this is definitely a unique approach. This is definitely something that has an outcome that makes sense. And essentially, that's what we do here at the Food Allergy Institute. Our work for 20 years now has been focused on getting every single patient who joins us to a state of remission. We'll talk about the details of that. Obviously, you'll hear it through Holly's story directly, but we take this incredibly seriously. And to have done this for 20 years of time and to have about 2 patients hitting remission every single day, and that number is only growing, is just a sign of, I think, the solution that lies within our system, whether that's through biosimilar protein immunotherapy, the data stack, the machine learning AI, the patient experience. Really, it's the whole process that gets our patients to the finish line every single day. And again, one of the most amazing things is that this is a lifetime of remission. This is not something that lasts for a few months or, a few weeks. This is a lifetime solution. And so, for that, again, hopefully that message is clear. And I think we'll hear it through Holly's story as well. Next slide. So just a brief introduction of myself. If you haven't heard me speak previously, I often get asked why do this work? And it really stems from my background. I'm a unusually high board certified physician. I'm a scientist. I have over 100 plus publications. I have lots of titles. But being a transplant pulmonary ICU immunologist is just a sign of, I think, my approach to very complex conditions. And when I started dealing with food anaphylaxis 20 years ago, I just could not understand why we did not apply a more rigorous approach to discover how to diagnose this condition properly. And soon enough, we were able to use early machine learning systems to find out how much protein will trigger what level of reaction. That's something no one else has been able to do to date. We then added to that all of the concepts and discovery that noted how biosimilar proteins work. And by using biosimilar proteins, we can actually draw down the immune response. And when we do that in an organized way, we can build AI systems to design an actual therapeutic process, and then ultimately putting patients in remission. So what we've done here is, again, absolutely remarkable. It handles the entire scope of the food allergy process, from accurate diagnosis to therapeutic process to remission into long-term remission. And again, this is what we apply to every patient, whether they're 6 months old or whether they're in their late 20s, and obviously we'll continue to expand the age population as we go. Next slide. So with that said, again, enough about me. I would like to enthusiastically introduce Holly Leatherman. She is very kind enough to help support our nonprofit branch, our parent company, TPERC. She's been helping us out, as far as getting the word out about TIP, sitting with parents and really explaining to them what's involved, how the process works. So I thought it would be really great to have her just walk you through her experience. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Holly. Thanks again for helping us out today, Holly.
Yep. Thank you for having me. My name is Holly. I have 2 children that went through the program, Levi and Cora, and we traveled from Maryland. So my kids were allergic to, both of them were allergic to peanuts, tree nuts, eggs, sesame, and some legumes. And then in addition to those, my daughter was also allergic to sunflower. So we made our first trip out to California in March of 2020. I always say that the week that the world shut down, we took a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old cross country. So we made that first trip in March of 2020. And then it was about 3.5 years before my son graduated and 3 years to get my daughter to graduation. So we are about 1.5 years out from my son's graduation. And then we're just 1 month shy of my daughter being 2 years since she graduated. So next slide. All right, so Levi was diagnosed with food allergies at 1 year old. And so first he was diagnosed with a dairy allergy. And then we also had him tested for peanuts. And then whenever that came back positive, then we were obviously afraid to introduce any of those other top allergens to him. At the time, it was still kind of the rule that you waited until they were 2 to introduce those things. So we were afraid then to introduce them. So we had him tested for the tree nuts and egg, and those both came back as positive as well. And then having a second child, we were obviously pretty afraid of introducing any foods to her. And so whenever we were offered a spot at Johns Hopkins for a study for early introduction to peanut, then we jumped on that because that was our chance to get her tested for allergies. And then we were going to be introducing peanut to her at 4 months old in a hospital setting with allergists there. And so that was that made me feel a lot more comfortable about giving her peanut butter at that time. Whenever my kids were diagnosed with food allergies, it was basically like, here's an EpiPen, avoid their allergens. And, that was really the only information that we were given. And so we were obviously very scared, and began doing some of our own research. Through Johns Hopkins, my son was able to do the dairy ladder. Whenever he was about 3 years old, we started with that. We tried the egg ladder with him, but unfortunately, he failed out of that. Their egg ladder, they start directly with chicken eggs, and they do not have you separate egg yolks and egg whites. So he was consistently having reactions to the eggs whenever we were trying to do the egg ladder. So next slide then. So we lived in, our safe bubble at home for years, researching restaurants whenever we would go out, bringing our own cupcakes and stuff to birthday parties, and then just all of the stress that comes with being a food allergy parent, over analyzing every, hive and cough. My kids would always get hiccups whenever they would have a reaction. So, anytime that they would get hiccups, then it's like, checking them to see if they have hives anywhere and going through in your mind, like, what have they eaten recently? What have they been exposed to? Is this the beginning of a reaction? So we were doing research online because, again, we didn't feel particularly prepared by the allergist. And so I was on one of like the Facebook mom allergy groups, and I found someone who had made a comment about it was Southern California Food Allergy Institute whenever we found it. But someone who had made a comment about that, and I began researching it because we had recently done the dairy ladder. The process made sense to me of, starting with small amounts of the protein and then working our way up. So it looked like a similar process to the dairy ladder, but it definitely looked to be like a more cautious and safe approach. Like I said earlier, whenever we did the egg ladder for my son, we started straight with chicken eggs, and we didn't separate egg yolks and egg whites. So the fact that we were starting with um, eggs that had biosimilar proteins and we were separating out those proteins and everything, it made me more confident in their approach. And I felt like it was a much safer approach and just, a more scientific approach. So next slide. So we traveled during the pandemic. Again, we're coming from Maryland. So whenever we first started air travel, it was not crowded at all, which was really nice for us. And then by the time that the airlines began getting more crowded, then our kids were used to flying, and we had everything down by that time. And it just became part of our routine very quickly. In order to save money for travel and expenses and stuff, we got the Southwest Companion Pass. And so the only flight that we ever paid for was our first flight out to California. And then we were able to fly all of us out to California using the companion pass for my son and then using points for the rest of us to fly. So that saved us thousands of dollars over the course of the years in traveling. The other advice that I would give is to do early morning and direct flights. The planes are typically cleaned overnight. So whenever you get on it, first thing in the morning, then they have just been cleaned and you don't have to worry about, peanut M&Ms and those sorts of things on the floor. You can also pre-board to wipe down your seats. just to give yourself some extra peace of mind. And then we also stayed at Staybridge Hotels. They are just a couple miles away from the clinic, and they have a kitchen and everything in the rooms, so that way you are able to prepare your own meals and everything too. So next. So because my kids were so young, morning maintenance became routine pretty quickly in our house. And I feel like they didn't really remember life before, and having maintenance for breakfast just became the norm. I think it helped too that both of them were in the program. If one was able to eat, whatever they wanted for breakfast, and the other one had to eat their maintenance doses before they could eat other things, then I think I probably would have gotten a little more pushback. But since they were both in the same boat, then they were in it together. I had to be a little bit creative with things. I would make waffles or pancakes or muffins. For a little while, my daughter ate some of her maintenance nuts mixed in some chocolate. But I just kept telling myself that like this is for a short period of time and it will benefit her, for the rest of her life. So if we need to give her a little bit of chocolate at breakfast, that's what we have to do right now. And then evening dosing time, we always did around dinner time, just so it was, less time that we had to find other things to do that were calm. Because my kids were, again, 2 and 4 whenever we started the program. So keeping that age calm for an hour can be kind of difficult. But for, a half an hour of that, we were sitting at the table eating dinner. So that was less time that I had to worry about trying to keep them calm. So next slide. All right. So the advice that I always give to anybody who is starting the program is to just celebrate every milestone, and that will, just kind of keep you going until you hit the next one and the next one and the next one. So a major milestone for us was clearing cross contact. We felt like then we didn't have to worry about accidental exposure. And, it just, whenever you're reading labels, all of those may contain statements, all of that just doesn't matter anymore. So before starting the program, my son made up this wish list that he has here on the slide. And so that was another thing that just kind of kept him motivated. Whenever, if there was a time that he didn't really want to eat, a maintenance dose or a dose in the evenings, and, we would just be like, well, this is the next thing that we're working towards, and look at the things that we've already been able to check off and everything. So we felt like that was helpful for him. And then we had been in the program for about a year before we were able to check anything off. But we were we knew that things were working though, because my daughter had an accidental exposure to some cupcakes, and they had egg in them, and then they also had egg white in them, and we had not reached chicken egg yet. And I can't remember if we were doing quail or duck at the time, but we hadn't reached chicken egg yet, and she had no reaction to them at all. And so that's whenever we knew that, this program definitely is working. So we hadn't even reached, those proteins yet, and already her body was able to accept them and not react. So next slide. All right. So life now is very different. So I feel like we're finally living. We have been able to go on some vacations. Beforehand, I would a lot of times call restaurants that were, in like a certain radius around where we were staying to see where we could eat at and what would be safe for my kids. And, we went to Disney last April, and the waiters are, I've always heard that they're very good at handling allergies. And so the waiters and the waitresses would always come over and ask, if anybody at our table had any allergies, and we were able to tell them no, and it felt wrong. But we could finally say no, that nobody had any allergies, and everybody was just able to eat whatever they wanted. So the my kids are in different sports now, and so they're able to eat the snack that you have after baseball games and everything without any worries. So a lot of the mental toll and the stress that comes with living with food allergies, or your kids having food allergies, that is all gone now. My kids love to eat. My daughter particularly likes peanut M&Ms. Both of my kids love Dunkin' Donuts and Chick-fil-A. And then there's a local bakery that my kids really like to eat the cupcakes from. And then I had a realization a couple weeks ago that my son, everything that he eats for breakfast most mornings are things that he wouldn't have been able to have like 5 years ago. So he'll eat 2 to 3 eggs every morning at breakfast time. He loves French toast, and he really likes Honey Nut Cheerios. So those are all things that he wouldn't have been able to have, 5 years ago. So next slide. All right. So because my kids were so young, neither of them had developed any kind of stress from the food allergies. That was all mine. It was just me that was stressing out about everything. But now they're able to enjoy, going to extracurricular activities and stuff, and not having to bring their own food, because even though they didn't stress about their food allergies, they didn't like the fact that I had to come to the birthday party with a cupcake for them. So we don't have to do that anymore. And then I would say that there's pros and cons. My kids were pretty young whenever we started the program. And I think that there's pros and cons to every age. Because they were young, it's a little more work on my part, because I had to make the foods, more palatable for them. So I had to be kind of creative in the kitchen and everything. They also weren't involved in a lot of extracurricular activities at the time. So we had, a more flexible schedule in the evenings to do the treatment doses and stuff. And then also neither kid had developed any kind of mental health issues prior to treatment. So they didn't, deal with worrying about the doses and those sorts of things. And then if you guys want to follow our page, we have a Facebook page, Levi and Cora's Road to Food Allergy Freedom, that we updated while we were in the program. And then, now I share little tidbits of things that we're enjoying now, and just memories and stuff like that on the page. And I mean, anybody's welcome to, contact me through there.
That was great. That was great. Thank you very much, Holly. I hope your kids have a great dentist and have great, dental habits. And I'm sorry the price of eggs are so high. That's out of my control, unfortunately. But no, they're doing great. Cora and Levi are just, again, 2 examples of kids who had anaphylaxis. I think I saw that question pop up. Of course, the only patients we treat are patients who have had anaphylactic history of reactions. Obviously, that's the only work that we do. But if it's okay with you, I'll answer some of these earlier submitted questions. Then, of course, we'll open it up to the general audience, and we'll get Holly's feedback on many of the questions. We'd like to bring her into this as well. As far as side effects of treatment, I'll maybe give some general answers to that question, and then maybe Holly can chime in on any side effects that she may have seen with her kids. Right now, approximately 82% of our patients, 82% will go start to finish without any reported side effects, meaning they will go start to finish and never once ping our system. And that means they won't submit to command control, they won't submit any sort of emails, and they will not report it when they come in for their clinical challenge visits. So that's a very high number that outperforms really anything else that's out there. The remaining group, the remaining 18% will the majority of them will have only one reported symptom in their entire treatment process. That's often oral itch, stomach ache, or a set of hives. A very small percentage of our patients, just under 1% of our patients, will have repetitive symptoms, meaning they're going to have more than one set of symptoms. That's not something that we allow to continue. We have obviously a command control center. We will use our AI machine learning methods to readjust, modify the treatment vectors so that those symptoms need to stop. So our goal is very simple. We want to have a side effect-free program for every single patient. And I'm always most proud of those very complex cases, the ones who do have some symptoms. We are very good about getting them back on track and getting them to a point where they are actually reaching remission as well. So that's my answer to those questions. Holly, I don't know if you want to comment on any symptoms that you may have seen with your kids. Oh,
all right, it wasn't allowing me to unmute myself. There we go. My children both, my daughter never had any kind of reactions throughout the program. My son had just a couple minor little things. And I always say that the encouraging thing about that was that, there's the 24-hour reaction hotline. So we were able to call in and talking it out with the person, the doctor, we were always able to find, the reason for the reaction, which was encouraging. So that way it wasn't repeated. We had one time where my son had like a little bit of an itchy mouth, and we called in and I wasn't sure, what the problem was. And then that evening, as I'm like checking his teeth to make sure that he had brushed them well enough, I noticed that an adult tooth had popped up behind his baby tooth. So he hadn't lost the baby tooth yet, but the adult tooth had just popped up. And I know that that tooth was not there that morning whenever I had checked his teeth. So I mentioned it to the doctor on call, and they said, yep, that was probably what had caused it. The proteins had gotten into the bloodstream without being broken down through the stomach first. So, every time that there was something, and he only had like 2 or 3 like very minor, like a hive popped up one time or the itchy mouth. I mean, we were always able to find a reason why, because obviously, you don't want to keep repeating reactions. So yeah, we were always very encouraged by that.
Thank you. Next question is, are there ever setbacks in treatment? If so, what causes setbacks and how are they managed? Again, the vast majority of patients do not have any setbacks in treatment. I would say most setbacks occur due to social circumstances. So, a parent may, have a health condition that unfortunately happens, and they can't bring their kids in for treatment. We still work with them. We may have a situation where a parent may lose a job, and that, obviously changes some of the dynamics. Again, we work with those families as well. So I'd say the vast majority of setbacks, should they occur, are generally more of those social circumstance type setbacks. If there's a situation, for example, where a patient is moving to another country, if a patient is going away to graduate school or something, we also would classify those as setbacks, but we will always find a way to work with patients. Again, the great benefit of using a lot of data science is these adjustments can occur in a matter of milliseconds, and we'll be very confident that they'll continue to move forward. Question number 3 is, how does FEI handle patients who may have complex cases or underlying health conditions? That is the majority of our cases. I think, Holly, obviously your kids were young and had anaphylactic reactions to a number of different foods. The majority, 2/3 of our patients have typically more than 6 primary anaphylactic allergens. So that means they have had anaphylactic reactions to a majority of the primary food groups that are out there. That is what we do every day. That is what we're comfortable with. As far as underlying health conditions, we also take the entire gamut of complexity. So if there's underlying asthma, if there's underlying atopic dermatitis or eczema, if there's underlying EOE, if there's other medical conditions. Again, as long as we have the ability to communicate and contact the specialists that are involved in the case, and we always work in a multidisciplinary fashion, we will get the clearance and work with those specialists. We have a handful of patients who've undergone all solid organ transplantation, and they're being treated here as well. So just to give you an idea of how complex the cases can be, we do not shy away from those types of cases. And again, I do believe that that clearly separates us from most therapy that is out there. And then as far as how do you ensure that patients be safe while updosing, that's a great point. And in fact, that's one of the largest differentiators of us. If you look at the world of OIT, you have to go into the office for 6 hours, sometimes 7 or 8 hours once a week for a long time. The vast majority of this program, the tolerance reduction program, is done at home. That means all of your updosing is done at home. That is for all the different vectors of food proteins, and that's done. And how do we ensure the actual safety? That is what is the beauty of data science, right? So it is this large scale data, the petabytes of data that we have over 20 years, that is fed into our different forecasting methods that we utilize. And because we use this on a regular basis, we can ensure that level of safety while updosing at home. Again, are we absolutely perfect? No, but we're very close. And that's why the majority of patients are able to go through the process relatively, without any sort of symptoms, and obviously reach remission, just as, Cora and Levi did as well. So next slide. So these are questions that were submitted for Holly. I'll let you maybe take number one, and I may throw in a couple points as well. So number one,
Yep.
What is maintenance in remission like?
Yep. So for the first year, maintenance in remission was once a week. And then after a year, we went back to California and had lab work done. And a lot of my children's foods went down to once every 2 weeks. It was their top, allergens that have stayed at once a week. But it's definitely more manageable than what it was whenever we were doing morning maintenance every morning, and treatment doses in the evening and everything. So yes, it's a lot more manageable, once a week or once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that is the goal for our patients as they hit year one of remission. As they get to year two and year three, the frequency of what we call sustained unresponsiveness moves to 2, 3, and sometimes 4 weeks of sustained unresponsiveness, which is really great. Maybe a question for you, Holly, on remission. So, rest periods and things of that nature, do you follow any of those?
No, we don't. So yeah, my kids are able to, do whatever after their, they eat their doses. My son has been experiencing a little bit of acid reflux or heartburn after just like a couple of his nuts. So we don't let him go like buck wild and crazy after that, just because we don't want the acid reflux to be acting up. But I mean, we're not worried about any kind of a reaction after they dose.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do you have tips for traveling during treatment? I think you did a great job explaining kind of how you use the companion pass and other things. Is there anything else you want to maybe add to that great list?
I would say that, in addition to the other things, we would usually do a grocery order pickup for shortly after we landed. So, from the airport, we would stop and get our grocery order, and then, stop at the hotel. And, I do think that having a kitchen at the hotel is, especially in the early days, a must, because you're going to be doing cooking at home and everything. Now, as we went through the program and more foods were cleared for us and everything, then we definitely did take advantage of being able to eat out more and that sort of thing. But certainly in those early days, a kitchen is necessary. So
That's great. And then as far as kind of the scheduling side of things, right? You're talking about, some, morning, maintenance. You're talking about some afternoon treatment foods, and this is going on for a couple of years. How did you balance that out? How did it affect your family, your day-to-day life, work? pick up, drop off, any of those kinds of things? What was that like, and how did you eventually kind of get to a good balance point with it?
Yeah, so because my kids were young, then they weren't in a lot of, the activities and everything in the evenings. So, for us, as long as they got all of their maintenance in the mornings before school, and then that, it leaves you your whole afternoon or evening if you need some flexibility because of different activities or whatever going on in the afternoons or the evenings. So, we were able to make it work. Very easily for us. But again, I mean, I know that our kids were younger and they weren't involved in all of those activities and that sort of thing. So I think that's why we were able to do it very easily. And I know it's not easy for everyone, but that was again one of the benefits of going through the program so young. So.
Thank you. And how about what was the most surprising or unexpected part of tip treatment?
So I think honestly, the most surprising part was that, I mean, it became a routine for us very quickly. And, the kids just kind of accepted morning maintenance and accepted, being calm in the evenings for treatment dosing and everything. And then the other thing that surprised us was my daughter, especially, had some pretty significant eczema and that cleared up. And my son also had pretty severe asthma. And while we were going through the treatment, we were noticing less and less issues with his asthma. And honestly, now he doesn't have any problems at all with his asthma. So we were just expecting, for you guys to treat the food allergies for them. And so the eczema and the asthma were just added bonuses.
No, that's exactly right, right? We are using our data modeling to look at the entire immune system. So if we're seeing anything that's active on the lung side, if we see anything that's active on the skin side, nasal, ocular allergies, things of that nature, we do comprehensively approach the case. So it is very, very common for children to enter TIP with eczema, other allergic conditions, and so forth. They finish, their food allergies are in remission, and their skin is essentially normal. Their lungs are in great shape, and even their nasal allergies are in excellent condition. So that is the benefit again of like a whole model that we use for every single patient. How did your child or your children emotionally or mentally handle this process? I know you said, obviously, Cora was younger, but how did you see this with your kids?
They both handled it really well. They were both very young whenever they had reactions, so they didn't remember having any reactions and didn't, have any anxiety about that. Also, I think because we had gone through the dairy ladder, we explained to my son whenever he was going through it that, we are feeding him dairy in these, little amounts and working his way up. So it, I think that kind of also got him used to the idea that, he was eating things that he was allergic to, but we were, focused on doing it safely and, speaking up if he had any funny feelings or reactions or anything like that. But I think because they were so young, though, they didn't have any anxiety about the process and reactions or anything like that.
I would just add that, as kids get older, especially I'd say between the ages of like 9 and 12, as they kind of hit middle school, we definitely see an uptick in anxiety. That's certainly there. And again, we try to provide as much resources as possible to help manage, that as far as the patients are concerned. But the greatest thing is as they move through the program, I mean, I've seen some of the most anxious individuals you can imagine. And as they move through the program, they pass challenge after challenge of consuming these foods that once caused serious reactions. There's nothing better for your mental health than seeing that. And so the anxiety really just kind of plummets. And I'd also add for the parents, particularly the moms, who often carry this burden so much more, their anxiety also kind of goes down as well, which is just a really wonderful thing to see. And the last question is, what made you feel confident that TIP was the best choice for your children?
So, I found it on, a food aller or food allergy like mom's group, and I began researching it. And just, hearing about the process, it made sense to me because we had done the dairy ladder through Johns Hopkins. I loved that it seems like a safer approach because you're starting with biosimilar proteins. I had spoken to a couple people that were in the program and they had great things to say about it. And so it made sense to me, the idea of starting with the biosimilar proteins and working our way up. And then it just, it made sense, and it seemed like just the dairy ladder to like the nth degree. It was just so much more cautious. And so, we had just heard from other people about, how safe it was and everything. So we felt that it was a good fit.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate, right? I mean, confidence comes in looking at what are the therapeutic options for your kids, right? And really, obviously 5 years ago was a little bit different. Nowadays, you have the option of Xolair, but then you look at that and say, okay, is it worth, injecting my child with multiple injections, typically every 2 to 4 weeks, indefinitely? And then even there's only about a 60% chance of success, and they still can't consume foods. Does the fear and the avoidance truly go away with that type of an approach? And then obviously with OIT, OIT is I certainly been around for, again, better part of about 17, 18 years now. And it's been interesting to see that it has not picked up as far as wide scale. And the number one reason for it, and it was abundantly clear at the conference over the weekend, is that when you have a 35 to 40 to 45% rate of reactions that are pretty severe, it's hard to trust it. It's hard to trust that you can kind of move forward in that. And again, our model, our system, from start to finish is built on hard data science for a specific patient, and then of course making sure that they are progressing through the program, collecting that information as they continue to progress through the program, ultimately reaching the finish line. And this is the model that's been repeated now for 20,000 plus historical patients. Thank you again, Holly, for your time. I know you have a limited amount of time, but we are going to try and open this up to the general audience here. So what we're going to do is we will click on your, well, first of all, we'd ask you to raise your hand so you can use the emoji or the emoticon there to kind of raise your hand. And we will then click on your name and ask you to unmute. And then you can tell us who you are, where you're from, and feel free to ask your questions. So we'll start here with Karan. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Hey, my name is Karan Veer. I have been living in East Coast, and one of my friends recommended to check out Food Allergy Institute. I've been following you guys on Insta for a couple of months now. So my daughter has allergies from tree nuts, peanut, and she's lactose intolerant as well and has eczema. So it has been difficult for all of us, of course, in the family. So my question is, I have seen other people asking same question as well. So when you're traveling and coming over to West Coast for the treatment, so I know it is 4 to 6 times a year. So, but for how long, or what is the initial process a person has to go through? Should we register online, or what is the full process initially for a person?
Sure. So the process begins with talking to our enrollment team. Our enrollment team is available basically every single day. You can call in. You can also look at the link that we'll provide you here in the chat box. And once you move forward with the enrollment team, the next step is actually setting up the first visit. That's called an onboarding visit. The onboarding visit is important because that's where we actually collect the initial set of data. So that is a blood draw. But again, remember, we're a unique organization. We have our own diagnostics laboratory that's critical to provide the best, highly accurate type of data that's needed to treat your child. And that information is input and basically put into our AI system so that when you come back for the launch visit, you will know exactly what the treatment plan looks like for your child. So based on what you just mentioned, it could be potentially a 2-year plan. It could be a 2.5-year plan. It just depends on the severity of the particular case. But again, we are going to make sure that this is explained in detail, and you'll know really within a pretty high level of confidence how many months you will be in the program to hit remission. And that's something that we have a pretty high level of accuracy in forecasting. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, next is, sorry, I think it says RB. Hi.
Hi,
Hello,
Michelle here. Thank you. It's my understanding that you've stated that your lab can test for the severity of an allergy with the lab work that you do that's not available anywhere else, which I think is amazing. But how sensitive and specific is that data? And are you testing for foods or allergens that a patient has never been exposed to as well?
That's correct. So we test for all the big 9 allergens. Of course, we do extend that further based on subgroups of proteins. So you mentioned not only the diagnostics laboratory, but it's the diagnostics laboratory plus the AI data science. You have to have both of those things to hit high levels of accuracy. We published our work in PLOS ONE, which is one of the top journals in the world about 2 years ago. If you look at our data there for peanut, that was hitting about a 94% positive predictive value, sensitivity and specificity also in the 90s. So it far outperforms, any type of skin testing or any type of basic testing. But to your point that you brought up, you have to have really good accuracy on your numbers, which means the data has to be highly validated. So I'll just give you a quick example. Most places will be testing a walnut allergy with a single 1 or 2 tests, maybe 3. We're going to be looking at walnut from an angle of about 8 to 10 parameters. Right. So we're looking at things in a very different way than anyone else. That with that type of angle, you're going to have much higher levels of accuracy.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Next is Allison. Hello.
Hi. I had a question about how long does it typically take? Do you do a few months or maybe a year and you're clearing the first allergen, and are you considered in remission of that one allergen and then you're moving on to the next? Because I know you say it could be 2.5 to 4 years for complete allergy remission, but what about individual allergens?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to treat everything. So when your child finishes the program, there should be no anaphylactic foods known to man. I will say that because there might be some food out there that we have not found yet. I don't think we missed one yet, but there will be no anaphylactic proteins left on the list, meaning that the chance of anaphylaxis is off the table. And that's how we operate. And so, we're not treating one food at a time in that sense. We have formats using the data science, pre-treatment, conditioning, induction, remission. We run all of those formats across all proteins simultaneously. So we're treating multiple foods at the same time. And as Holly, I don't know if you want to chime in on that, but how long into treatment did you see kind of the clearance of one food versus the next?
Yeah, we were about 1.5 years in before we reached, like clearance for, I believe it was eggs that we first reached clearance for. But we were able to eat eggs freely then. We just maintenance doses and treatment doses cannot be eaten within 4 hours of each other. So we just had to make sure that they didn't eat any eggs within 4 hours of their treatment doses. But I mean, it opens up a lot of doors whenever they clear something, and whenever they reach cross contamination for all the tree nuts, all of those sorts of things. I mean, every milestone that you reach, it opens up more and more doors.
Great. Thank you very much. And just to add, we are checking the data sets on your child every 12 to 14 months. So we're not just doing it once and not looking at it again. Checking every 12 to 14 months not only ensures safety, it ensures a mechanism to make adjustments so that nothing bad can happen. That's the whole point of what we do, right? We're almost surveying a treatment process, making adjustments without, families even understanding what that looks like. That assures a level of safety and consideration, which is important. Next is Summer. Hi, Summer, if you can go ahead and unmute and ask.
Hi.
Hello.
So last time I participated in this, I told you that our daughter had never had a reaction. She was referred to the allergist. Blood work and skin pricks tell us what she's allergic to, and we've since avoided. A lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. She had her first anaphylactic reaction 2 weeks ago, which the allergist said was a perfect storm of environmental allergens. So I know at this initial appointment, y'all gather blood work and do the back prick. How does slit come into that? And does the seasons and the high pollen affect when to start and dosing?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sorry to hear that your daughter, had the anaphylactic reaction. That's got to be, obviously very stressful. It goes back to the basic issue of what can trigger reactions, right? And there's a trigger threshold for every patient. And so with our data analysis, we're going to look at all factors, including age, including pollen counts, including other potential what we call comorbidities. If we can understand that, we can then predict what level of reaction will occur with what amount of protein that's ingested. To answer your question specifically, we do put roughly 1/3 of our patients on a patient-specific form of environmental treatment because it does actually tie into their food anaphylaxis risk. So, for example, we'll take somebody who's anaphylactic to peanuts, and we will again only base it on their analytics. We will add in certain types of proteins that are found perhaps in weeds or in trees or in a grass, and we'll make sure that those are in the system so that we're turning those down as we're turning down the rest of the allergic response. And that's why, as Holly was mentioning, sometimes patients are coming in very allergic, with asthma and runny nose allergies and ocular allergies, and then they finish and all those things are gone as well.
Great. And one last question. Our pediatrician is interested in exploring her gut health to see if that helps her sensitivity. How does that go along with treatment? Is this something we should do beforehand or not touch at all?
I mean, look, my honest answer is I don't know the details of what that means because I feel like, we do things, I think, in a very academic, scientific way, right? I mean, that's how we do our work every day. I feel that sometimes this kind of the gut health world is a world that has tests that are not validated, changes are made that don't exactly make scientific sense. But we're open-minded. Like I said, if they have an interesting approach to things, have them contact us, and we're happy to have a conversation with them. But I would just put some caution out there on spending a lot of money on something that may not, may not be so beneficial.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, next is Valerie. Hi, hello, Valerie. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you. Glad to be here. My daughter is 16 and she was diagnosed. Well, even at birth, they said that she would probably be very allergic to many things because of the way she reacted to the blanket when she was wrapped. But we did have an anaphylactic experience when she was 2.5. We had avoided nuts, but at church, somebody gave her a Snickers at Easter and we ended up having to go to the ER. That was our first experience, and we were told that she definitely had a severe reaction that would probably be much worse the next time. We've been through 5 or 6 different allergists. She's also got a lot of environmental allergies, but she's allergic to most tree nuts, shellfish, fish, and peanuts is, the one that she's anaphylactic to. So we've been through a bunch of allergists, and all of them have said that OIT was not an option for her. So I was really happy to see your program and see that it is. Summer kind of touched on my issue, and that's with the environmental allergies. We're in Houston, Texas, and there is just a lot of, molds, grasses, pollens that, affect her daily, and we take Zyrtec daily. She has most of her life, and so that helps with that. But my main question is, would we need to change our environment in order for her to be able to thrive better in this program?
That's a great question. The short answer is no. I mean, again, it's almost 55% of our patients are from outside of California. So, all the comments about the East Coasters and such, we hear you. We treat those patients every single day. So when we look at the environmentals, again, it all comes back to really fundamental data science. How do we accurately get the right flora and fauna, the right epitopes, the right sequences? And that takes building the right types of tests. And so our diagnostic laboratory can test across functionally several hundred different flora and fauna as far as environmentals are concerned, with a very high level of accuracy. We treat international patients as well. So we've even had to build the analytes out for, you can imagine, those environments in other continents. And so ultimately, we would never ask a family to relocate themselves in that sense, but we will do our very best to kind of cross-match and down-regulate the environmental response. Keep in mind, though, we are doing it for the food allergies, right? So it's not our top priority. We're doing it to down-regulate and keep a child in a very safe spot, so that as we turn down the food anaphylactic response and now they're in remission, typically patients will hit remission and stay on environmental therapy for about 2 additional years. And then that kind of wraps up the rest of their environmental treatment process.
Okay, thank you very much. And one thing I wanted to mention specifically again to Summer, we also had doctors, we've been to so many doctors her whole life, doctors who've said this looks like this could be a gut issue. You may want to see a doctor about her gut. And we've done that. And she has, like, they've never given any direct answer. No resolution has come to what could be bothering her gut. And I feel a lot of it could be due to a lot of the allergies she has. And that could be part of the culprit with her gut issues.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But thank you for your program, and this looks promising, and that's something we've never had. And so it means a lot to us to even know that this program exists.
No, thank you very much. And I would just add, remember that the majority of pollen, right, that we breathe in every single day, the vast majority of it from a mass standpoint is in your gut. So it's being swallowed all day long. So your gut, and the pollen does have a major impact on your food allergies and your general health. All right, next is Arzu. Hello. If you go and unmute. Nope. All right, we'll come back to you. We'll move on to Andrea. Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this program. I have a 14-year-old who is severely allergic to tree nuts and also peanuts. We've had a few different unfortunate anaphylactic reactions, so this is like very exciting for us that you have this program. But my son has participated in OIT for peanuts, and he was successful. But because we did that program, we understand that maintenance can be very difficult and challenging, especially for a child who always is used to, not eating the things he's allergic to, right? So the maintenance part has been extremely tough. And we did finally find peanut M&Ms, and that's what he's been eating to try to keep up with the maintenance. But I want to understand more what the life is like for a child during the program, a child that has tree nut allergies. For what does maintenance look like, and what does what is the treatment like? What does he have to eat each day? Because I want to explain to him before we start the program, like, this is what you're signing up for, because it's we're located in Florida, so it's going to be hard for us to get there, and it's so it's a lot of time and expense that we're going to put into it. And he wants to sign up, but I need to explain to him what it is, like how much you're going to eat each day during this program, like what do you need to do. He's also extremely athletic, so I need to understand what the ramifications are if he can't do exercises for a certain amount of hours. So if you could kind of walk me through, for a tree nut kid, what it looks like.
That's a great question, and thank you for that. I'll also ask Holly to maybe give her experience on this as well, but I'll start. So it is a commitment. I mean, without a doubt, that's the right word, right? It's a commitment, and you commit when you live with food allergies every day. I mean, your son is in a level of commitment right now to avoid. The commitment in this program, especially if he's already cleared peanut, is probably going to be roughly, just under 2 years if it's just tree nuts. So, the question becomes, can you commit to a process for, under 2 years? Ultimately knowing that the commitment becomes easier and easier and easier thereafter, right? And so the process in a day-to-day format is there's going to be a certain amount of protein that you have to consume from different foods in the morning. We call that maintenance, right? And so the maintenance side of things is as simple as maybe eating whole nuts that you've already been cleared in our program for, or it could be something that could be ground up. It can be baked or put into any other food product, right? And again, we have lots of resources and lots of ways to make that happen. The evening time is the treatment food process, and that's the at-risk foods, right? These are the ones that we're still building up. For plant proteins, 100% of the high-risk plant proteins we produce in our manufacturing facility, and we will give those to you. So they come in the forms of little gummies or little tarts. And I mean, I hate to use those terms because it almost downplays what we're doing, but we're talking pharmaceutical grade production of food proteins down to micrograms of accuracy. So that's how serious we take that. So the treatment time frame is relatively straightforward. You're just simply eating a couple of gummies or a couple of tarts. And we do ask for roughly a 45 to 60 minute, quote, take it easy period, not rest period in the sense where you can't do any activity. That's not at all what it is here. But, we don't want very high heart rate, sweating, those types of activities. But if you need to, do some errands or, be with your friends, play some music, things of that nature, all good. That's the day-to-day as it occurs. There's going to be adjustments in the treatment foods that will be given to you. That's all part of the forecast. And we do have a patient app that goes live here in the middle of May. That makes that process even easier because it's specific to your child, and that's going to kind of click through the process for you. And by the time you hit the end of your 8 or 9 week cycle, you'll be ready to come back to California. And there we do these large challenge amounts. I mean, it sometimes seems a little scary for families. It's like, well, hold on, we're going from this very small amount of walnuts, and now we're going to do a 14-gram walnut challenge. That's a third of a cup or close to almost half a cup of walnuts. But that's all forecasted, and that's part of the accuracy of what we do. So maybe I'll leave it there, and maybe Holly, if you can kind of add on to what your experience was and maybe the volume of things, maybe in direct terms.
Yes. Yep. So maintenance in the mornings, those are the foods that you've already passed. And so the tree nuts that my kids were less allergic to, those are small amounts of foods. So I know like one of them is, like one Brazil nut. So that's, easy enough to crush up and mix it in with oatmeal or applesauce or, whatever. The more allergenic foods, then those, they eat more of those in maintenance. But I would also just say that about every year you do blood work. So whenever you first pass a food, then it is in maintenance every day. And then, you get blood work done, and then foods may move to, once every 3 weeks or once every week. So, as you're in the program, things, move around and become less frequent. But yeah, so it's maintenance in the morning and then treatment dosing in the afternoons or evenings, where you're calm for about an hour after consuming your treatment foods. So.
If you don't mind me asking, how does that work with all the tree nuts? Like, are the children eating? I mean, there's so many different tree nuts. Do you have to eat them during the maintenance days, like every single tree nut, or is it just one or two?
So every patient is different, right? So again, that's what our diagnostic and our AI testing does. So if they're anaphylactic to walnuts, it may be the case that every biosimilar protein to walnut, not all of them are anaphylactic. So we will actually clear those very early, and you may only be left in maintenance with, say, walnut and pecan, but you may have another third or fourth. It depends on every case. But the total volume, remember, is that we are going to try and target the primary allergen, so the one that actually encompasses most of the biosimilar proteins. And so very quickly, you'll often note that a lot of the other tree nuts are weekly in dosing. You're not having to do them every day. and you're only left with 1 or 2 on a daily basis in the earlier phases of the program. And then ultimately, once you hit remission, everything moves to weekly or every 2 weeks. So it becomes pretty easy at that stage.
Okay, thank you.
So you're welcome.
Good morning. I think I missed my turn. So I have a question too.
Sure.
So why there are limited publications, considering the amount of patients and then the long history of the program? And then the second question is, what do you offer for patients with severe needle anxiety?
Great
For the
question.
blood work.
So we're getting a little feedback here. Okay, hopefully that's better now. As far as publications, I guess my answer to that question is we're somewhere around 18 to 20 publications at this stage. I don't know if that's not enough. If in the food allergy space, that's actually a significant number of publications. I would compare us to any of the commercial pharmaceutical companies that are out there. And the majority of them are actually at lower numbers of publications than us. We have published in major journals like PLOS ONE, Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, and we continue to publish on a regular basis. You'll see some more publications out this year as well. As far as needle phobia is concerned, we do have our own diagnostics lab, as I mentioned, and we are really, just to put it out there, if you were to try to have your labs done at a major, Quest Diagnostics or maybe a major hospital, and you had to draw 60% of the labs that we typically do, a child would have to go into that lab 2 or 3 times to have that blood drawn. And that's because the volume of draws and the amount of tests that they run and the variation of data that they have is so high, they need to collect extra blood. Here, every patient, including the very smallest of patients, come in and they just get 1 blood draw. And in that 1 blood draw, we collect enough minimal baseline blood because our systems are so efficient and accurately run that they simply need 1 draw. We have different options for needle phobia. We have different tricks and tools for even the youngest of children, as well as numbing agents that can be used directly. But we've never really had an issue with managing the needle phobia type cases. All right, next is Abby. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. We're very excited to start this program. I have a soon to be 11-year-old who's anaphylactic to peanuts, sesame, and most tree nuts. I have 2 questions. So one is about the antihistamine, the sort of the daily antihistamine. How long does the patient need to take that? I assume for the duration, but I'd love to hear. And also, what side effects, if any, have you noted in your patients from that antihistamine, and which antihistamine do you recommend? And then my second question was about maintenance foods once you've cleared them. Is there ever was there ever a time when someone's cleared a maintenance food and then had a reaction? My fear would be, I've given her breakfast with her maintenance food. She goes off to school and has a reaction. So just curious about those 2 things.
Very, very good question. I'll try and answer the second question first. So we do our very best to take all the risk of a food allergen and put it on us. And that's why when you come into our center, we are doing these high dose challenges after being appropriately, conditioned. We actually have the patients exercise to metabolic equivalents that are very high. So these are all strategies to make sure that clinically somebody has passed that food. So we have obviously data that predicts they passed, and we have now a clinical response that predicts they passed. So then have we had a patient who finishes that, moves foods to maintenance, and then later on down the road has a maintenance-based reaction? It is extremely uncommon. But I will say, I think every 4 to 5 months we'll have one. And I'd say almost always it's due to a situation where let's just put it this way, someone has stopped taking their maintenance for a few days, right? So there's a gap that wasn't supposed to be there. and then they added it back in. And of course, we saw some symptoms. Typically, though, maintenance-based symptoms are very mild. Like they're not causing a significant reaction where someone's going to school and having an epi type reaction. That's not the case. As far as antihistamines are concerned, and I'll have Holly kind of chime in on that as well. Antihistamines have been around for 100 years. It's a very, very safe class of medications. It's something that we use very low dose antihistamines for, and only for one reason, is that we're trying to really control a landscape within every patient of all types of communications that are going on. Histamine is not only released with allergic symptoms. Histamine is actually released on a daily basis, whether you're exercising, you're laughing, crying, any types of, multitude of environmental aspects will trigger histamine release. We like to keep that at bay, just kind of a nice low level, and that's why we recommend a low dose antihistamine. That antihistamine is stopped before they come in and do their challenges. We just like to have it on board for the majority of treatment. Once they're done with it, done with TIP, and they're in remission, the antihistamine goes away. Have we had side effects? Again, I would have to really scratch my head if we've had a serious issue. And in fact, I would not even say none of it's serious. I think some of it's perceived. Some parents think their kids are a little hyperactive on antihistamines, things like that. But even that is extremely unusual. We usually use levocetirizine or Xyzal. It's a particularly good antihistamine because it does not, it's an enantiomer, so it's a chemical structure that does not penetrate the blood-brain barrier significantly. So I feel like that's a particularly good one. And that's one of several that we'll use. So, but Holly, you want to maybe comment on your experience with antihistamines?
Yep. My kids were on an antihistamine because they both had eczema. So, my daughter at like 2 months old, we were told by the allergist to put her on an antihistamine. So, my kids were on an antihistamine even before coming into the program. And we switched to Xyzal whenever we started the program. We were on I think Claritin beforehand, but they had recommended Xyzal whenever we came in for our first appointment. We switched to that one. And then after graduation, I will say that they give you a very detailed plan on how to wean off of it. So it's not just you're done, this is the last day, sort of thing. They do give you a plan on how to wean off of it. So if you notice any, issues while you're weaning off, then you can certainly, contact them and, bring that to their attention.
Thank you. Next is Dana. Hi, Dana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I cannot believe we're speaking. I'm almost emotional. My son is going to be 18. He's going to college. We started at Jaffe in New York. We were waiting for Viaskin. We did not want to do OIT because of the esophagus issue. And I always said that the type of mom that I was going to be is not the mom I became after my son got diagnosed. Crazy. So he is going to college. Looks like all roads are leading to Maryland. Is this at all possible for a college student to do with our complete and total support?
Yeah.
That's my question number one. My question number two is, when you say antihistamines, that's not Benadryl, that's like Zyrtec or Allegra. And so he does get crazy on Zyrtec. So we can talk about that in private. Anxiety has been out of control. We just left UIUC for a visit. Milo ate something over the weekend. He got a hive that night. The next morning, we're getting on a plane. It was 12 hours later, and we had to call the paramedics because it basically turned out to be a panic attack. But who knew? I didn't know what it was. And then my last question, and I know I'm hitting you because I just can't believe we're speaking right now. I got through Lindsay Rosenblatt. Brody Rosenblatt is my student. Is the cross-contamination with the maintenance, we don't give Milo almonds because they don't make that almond brand anymore. That's all we have is Barney butter. And so that's it. If this works, I don't know. I'll clean your floors. I don't know what's going on. How is this even possible? Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Okay, that was a lot. Okay, so first question off is, can college students do this? Yeah, absolutely they can. We have right around 8% of our patient population is actively in college, so it's not a small number. Is it hard? Is it easy? Honestly, it just depends on your son. I mean, if he's serious about it, we're serious about it. We have some patients who kind of want to go a little slow. So we'll go like, all right, let's kind of only tackle a couple proteins at once. So it's not as disruptive. We have some patients who are on a timeline and they're like, no, I got to get this thing done in this period of time. So they go more aggressive, I guess, in that sense. So it's all possible. It really does depend on his motivation and how he'll balance a multitude of things. I will say that I feel most kids, I mean, I've done this for 20 years. I don't know how many, tens of thousands of food allergy patients I've interacted with. The vast majority of them are very serious people. They've learned how to deal with all kinds of stress and strain. So multitasking is not difficult for them. And so if we can kind of build that in, again, we have a patient app that's coming up, things that make things a whole lot easier. The majority of the doses, again, are prepared and given to you. So it's about a rhythm. If you get into a rhythm, I think, again, there's no reason to not believe he's not going to have success. As far as, antihistamines and such, again, I think I've answered that question. Again, generally not a concern. These are long-acting antihistamines. They last about 24 hours. We use low doses. That shouldn't be, an issue from that perspective. As far as, really just kind of the process, especially if you start in college here in the fall, it sounds like, right? Like in about 6 months, it's a good idea to kind of get a sense from him. What is the college schedule going to look like? What other activities is he involved in? And then what we do very well is we'll have patients kind of start in the summer, knock out a bunch of proteins, and then go slow, for semester one or quarter one, come back during Christmas, knock out a few things, slow again, knock out spring break, slow again, and then finish in the summer, that kind of concept. And so as long as you communicate with our teams, it's all possible. And don't worry, my floors are pretty clean, but I appreciate the offer. Next up is Perla. Sorry.
Hey
there
there.
you go.
So Perla's my wife, actually. She was here with me. She had to step out. I think she's still listening. That being said, and I want to first thank Abby because I had like 4 questions and she asked 2 of them, so that was helpful. One question I had, I know it sounds like after you take some sort of, I don't know if it's the gummies or whatever, you need to kind of take it easy for a little bit. One of the ideas I had, I'm originally from Southern California. I live in the Nashville area right now. I thought as kind of a fun thing for my kids would be when we take them, also make it a Disneyland trip or a baseball game. Is there any type of like, no, stay away from that because there's peanuts in the stadium, or Disneyland, like give it an hour or 2 before you go, or anything along those lines? But yeah, if you can answer that real quick.
Yeah. No, we encourage it, honestly. I mean, I can't tell you, how many families come out here and they get to see a lot of Southern California, through the experience. And, it's a great place. It's a beautiful place. And so we'll give you some feedback on that. Obviously on kind of like your launch visit, there's a patch test that we use. So we're going to give you some, things that you don't want to do for a few hours, but we're absolute pros at this. And we strongly encourage folks to really enjoy the sights of Southern California.
Okay. And then as far as, I assume there's like a cost per allergen that you're treating. How does that work? Or no, it's not?
No, it's one size. It's one for all. We test the patient. Again, we have all the data. And really it's more about time. So if you're really allergic to shellfish, for example, it's generally under a year. I mean, that's almost always the case. So you'll be done in 10 months and that's it. If you're anaphylactic to wheat and milk and a bunch of more complicated allergens, it's going to go longer, but we will do everything possible to complete all allergens within a specific period of time.
So generally speaking, the more allergens, the longer it takes?
Generally speaking, that's a fair statement. I would say, though, wheat anaphylaxis or wheat allergen is definitely a longer one in general.
Okay. Fortunately, we don't have the wheat. We've got plenty, but we don't have wheat.
Yeah. And remember one other thing is that you may think your child is anaphylactic to 12 or 15 things. I will tell you almost always it's a smaller number than you think.
Okay.
I can't say for sure until we look at data. And we do have the most cases where they are anaphylactic to 15 plus things, but
Right.
most often it's a smaller list than you think.
Okay. And then just, I think this was kind of answered, but I just want to get clarity. Are there cases of relapse? Like if you're on the program, you're maintaining, are there cases of relapse after they've graduated?
Yeah. So one of the key factors when you hit remission is, remember, we're taking somebody who's been in, let's call it a more tighter environment or a tighter system to keep them in that nice state of health. And now we're going to start to space them out to weekly or biweekly maintenance. That is ultimately the greatest kind of amount of work of the immune system to reach that sustained unresponsiveness. Right now, if you take 100 people who hit remission, we will have one patient who reports a symptom. If you take 500 people who hit remission, we'll have one patient who reports a significant symptom. So it's not common. And keep in mind, if that happens, they don't have to start all over again. It's typically a couple tweaks and they're right back on track. But the reality is it can happen. But again, very proud of our results. Post 2 or 3 years, patients in relapse, it's essentially unheard of, except for patients who become very negligent. They essentially stop everything. Fortunately, that doesn't even happen very often. But yeah, outside 2 or 3 years, we do not have any issues.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Thank you for taking a few questions from me, and we'll fill out the enrollment stuff. So thank you.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Next up is Courtney. Hello, Courtney.
Hi, I'm from Pennsylvania. I have a son that has an egg allergy. I've known about you guys for a lot of years, but it's just never seemed possible for us. But we recently attempted OIT and it was unsuccessful for him. So we really want to consider doing your program now. I'm just wondering if there's a waiting list currently.
No, there's no waiting list per se. Typically any patient who signs up with our enrollment team, if you want to start next week, that might be a bit difficult, right?
Okay.
So you have to schedule things out. But otherwise, no, there's no wait list at all.
Okay. And then with egg, is the egg baked that he will consume? I mean, cooked versus the egg white with the OIT. It was always just the liquid egg white.
Yeah, no, we will always use denatured forms of proteins. So definitely anticipate the first series of conditioning is going to be in a cooked form. At the end of the program, some parents opt for raw egg cycles. It's something we don't, I mean, let's put it this way. If you hit remission through our program with egg, a patient is consuming the equivalent of almost 2 whole eggs in one sitting. I'm talking AA large eggs in one sitting. There's no amount of raw egg that's going to be a problem for that patient. So really the raw egg aspect is up to the families themselves and if they want to try raw egg.
Okay. And then since I consider you to be the expert, epinephrine. Do you feel that nasal epinephrine is as effective as I am?
It's a great question. Obviously, there's a new FDA-approved product, 12 and above. So again, I'm an ICU guy, right? So we're used to dealing with epinephrine in all kinds of circumstances. We've used epinephrine for a long time through the airway, in different places, and we know it's effective. In the world of anaphylaxis, though, all the data has been studied in an injectable form, and we know that the injectable form has the highest rate of success. Unfortunately, the Neffy, at least that product in particular, never studied the product in anaphylaxis. Those are the facts. And so, I have concerns about that. I think the FDA, approves things in some odd ways sometimes. But do I think it's going to work in anaphylaxis? Probably. I'd say probably. Do I think it's going to be the best, first option? I'd say not yet for me.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Next is Christina. Hi, Christina. I think okay, we'll come back to you. Monica, hello.
Hello. I just want to say a shout out to Dana. I am in the same situation. I have my son's 18. He's graduating high school. And as he's looking at colleges out of state, we're in Scottsdale, Arizona. He has a lot of anxiety about going to college right now. We have failed OIT about 6 years ago. He has a tree nut allergy. So even that like 0.01 milliliter, he would just immediately start vomiting in the doctor's office. So we weren't able to complete OIT. So I have a friend here in Arizona. Her daughter went through the program. She's in remission. It's been life-changing for her, which is how I found you guys. My question is, you mentioned the morning foods must be eaten. Is that something like that a college student could have in their dorm? I mean, what type of food specifically? Anything that has to be like refrigerated, or how, can you give me an idea for a tree nut, what kind of food it would be?
That's a great question. So typically the tree nuts are shelf stable, right? So you can keep them at room temperature. You don't have to refrigerate them. And so most patients, when they're on tree nuts, what they'll let's give it a typical example, right? So freshmen in college, what parents will do is they'll produce about 30 days of a product and say keep it in the fridge or even the freezer. So typically it's baked goods, but it doesn't have to even be a baked good. You can pick something that's more savory in that sense. And as long as it stays in there, it's pretty easy. For kids who actually don't mind the taste and flavor of tree nuts, my general recommendation is just grind it up and you add it in as granola or something that's going to be like a breakfast, quick breakfast cereal or something of that nature. We are in the process of building in our manufacturing facility bars. These bars actually contain specific amounts of these tree nuts and peanuts and things of that nature. So that is coming here online. Peanut is actually going live here in the next number of weeks. So if we can find things that make it easier for kids, particularly college students, we are looking to make that happen.
Okay, and then my last question here is travel. I've read online it could be 1 to 2 days for a visit. Is that like if he's at an Arizona school, for example, and he flew into Long Beach, how long would that appointment? Is it something we can get in and out in the same day?
It is possible. It just depends on the total number of allergens that are being managed.
Okay.
So I'd say if it's only tree nuts, there'll be some visits where you can come in and out. Early in the program, it will likely be several 2-day visits.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Great questions. We're going to try and get through as many as we can here, a couple more in the end. Encourage you to, again, you can email, check into our system, but we'll try and get a few more questions here as we get to close time. Crystal, hi.
Hi. So my son is allergic to garlic, which the allergists here, say it's extremely rare. And it appears to be. Have you worked with someone? Yeah.
Garlic, isolated garlic anaphylaxis or allergy is unusual. Usually it's tied to other anaphylactic proteins. But yes, absolutely. We have patients, certainly every month we have a new patient anaphylactic reaction to garlic. Usually it takes a lot of garlic to trigger symptoms.
His was actually like he did a food challenge and it was half a size of rice in the office and within 30 seconds.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well,
so
definitely something we can handle, I can assure you.
Okay. And then what about, I know you mentioned histamine, that has a lot to do with allergies, of course. If somebody has like mast cell or histamine intolerance, how does that play a role with treatment?
So, I mean, obviously we need to know that information. We have patients with hereditary alpha tryptacemia. We have patients with MCAS. We have patients with various mast cell conditions. As long as we know that, we will find a way to manage those. We're experts in the space. So not a concern. Again, we will work in a multidisciplinary fashion with local doctors that you have. If not, we can provide most of those doctors ourselves.
Okay. And then just one more thing, as far as like a similar protein, are you referring to like onions and leeks and those types of things that you would, no? Okay.
No, generally not. So garlic is in this very large classification of betulaceae proteins. So these are a species class that's found in certain pollens, certain tree nuts, things of that nature. So it's a large class, but yeah, typically we're working across that level of evolutionary protein.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You got it. All right, I think I'm going to go for a last question here. Sasha. Hi, Sasha.
Hi there, thank you. So 3 quick questions. One of them is on the chat. So this is for the folks who have been asking this on the chat, and then the other 2 are mine. One was asking about cost and insurance. And then my 2 questions were if you're able to speak on whether there are any critiques or criticism of the TIP program from your kind of nationwide colleagues. And then finally, you know, in your 20 years of experience, I mean, this all sounds so incredible. I'm so thankful to be learning about this. I'm just curious, why hasn't the entire allergy community jumped on board like crazy with this? Why is OIT even still happening? Like, if this is truly as miraculous as it sounds, why are we only working in California right now? And I'm sure there are plans beyond, but I guess I'm wondering why the food allergy community as a whole and your professional colleagues, you know, why is this not more widespread at this point?
Yeah. So as far as the cost question, again, we'll defer to the chat box here. We'll give you the links for all that information. It's very clear. We're big believers in price transparency. That's not something you see in healthcare. You will always see that here. To answer your question, it's really quite simple. The commercialized model of healthcare, right? How a treatment gets to be commercially available. If you look at pharma, it takes an average of about 12 to 14 years to get something from an idea to an actual patient. If you look at therapeutic, or let's call it devices, you know, like the world of device, it simply takes around 8 to 9 years, and you have large commercial enterprises, pipelines that can take things to the next level. What we do here is incredibly complex, right? So imagine what we have here. We have hundreds of employees, literally about 200 and 240, 250 employees, 150,000 square feet of space, a research laboratory, molecular research, diagnostics laboratory. That's the largest diagnostics food allergy laboratory in the world. That's regulated at a level 3 high complexity level, a manufacturing facility that's producing pharmaceutical grade proteins, an AI software system, and a full team in-house that makes this entire process go, and a massive clinical team that has to provide virtual command control support and in-house therapeutics. So all that has been built in the 20 years, right? And so there is no commercial model that, and trust me, I've tried. 15 years ago, I said, hey, who's interested? Who wants to, you know, jump on this? And the answer was nobody. And now if you look at it, again, we were just at the largest allergy conference, you know, in the world just this last weekend. And the overwhelming feedback from the 1,000+ allergists who came up to us was, finally, there's something that makes some sense. It is difficult to do this work. We are in the AI, we're in the most advanced stages of AI. If you're in the AI world, you know that the number one criticism is, when are we going to actually have AI that's applied, that actually does something in real time? We are in a situation where AI makes a diagnosis, AI makes a therapeutic forecast. It actually tells you what you're going to take for how long to achieve remission, and AI that drives remission and puts patients into deep remission. I would love to see an AI tool that manages my blood pressure, for God's sake. You know, give me something simple, right? So we've worked very hard to get to where we are. And to your point, you know, we probably could have done more 5 years ago to market ourselves better, but we've been putting a lot of effort into just building an extremely safe and good product. Remember, we get about 5 to 7 new patients starting internationally every single month. They're flying here from all around the world. And I cannot tell you how much pressure that is on a system to make sure you get that right. And so our teams here know, I mean, my one phrase that everyone knows is we have to be wrong 0 times, right? So we're going to get things right, you know, as precisely as we can, and that's the model that we have. But yes, expansion is on our mind. We'll be doing some growth here this year and continue to grow. But the main limitation of our, you know, kind of widespread appeal or widespread marketing is that we're really focused on getting this done right. We've accomplished that now, and now we're starting that next phase of growth. And so certainly trust me that your allergists will hear more and more about us in the next months and years.
Thank you.
All right, listen, we do this webinar once a month. I encourage you to join again next month. Also encourage you to talk to our enrollment team as well. They know, they are very, very knowledgeable, and you can always email and ping us any other way possible. I also encourage you to look at our nonprofit parent company. That's right, the parent company of this organization is a nonprofit. It's an organization that I started also 20 years ago. They have great opportunities to talk to other parents like Holly. You can hear from them exactly what their experiences were like. This is all unfiltered. Again, I'm a absolute believer in transparency. You know what you're getting yourself into. You know that we're serious about this. You know, we're going to do everything possible to get your child to the finish line, whether they're 6 months old or 30 years old. We're going to try and get that done.